Welcome, my friends, to the Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking. And I'm your host, Mike Williams, and I will be joined by my blog partner, Al Williams, for this discussion. Tonight, our very special guest is David Icke. David is one of the preeminent researchers in the alternative research community. For almost 25 years, David has steadfastly pursued the truth and exposed the hidden forces behind the enslavement of humanity. Now, one footnote before we get into our discussion with David, and in the spirit of full disclosure, we experienced audio difficulties on our end, which resulted in Al and I having to reconstruct the questions and comments we made during the show. There were no audio issues on David's end. Please be assured we took great care in ensuring the integrity of the original content and flow of the program. So with that being said, my first question to David was to tell us about his new book, The Perception Deception, and here is what he had to say.
Well, in terms of what I've done in my life, if I died today, The Perception Deception would be the best thing I've done in my life, I feel. It's a massive work of the best part of 1,000 pages with like 900 images, illustrations, and 32 pages of color artwork, original color artwork. And what I wanted to do is, because I'm coming up now, Mike, to 25 years since this road started for me, consciously anyway. And I wanted to connect the dots across the great swathe of human society and experience. Everything from the nature of reality to the banking scams, because the more you go deeper in the rabbit hole, the more all these apparently disparate, unconnected elements of human experience fit together and connect. It all connects in the end. It's a gigantic tapestry. And what tends to happen is that most research tends to focus on the strands, the threads, the dots, whatever analogy you want to use. And what I've sought to do over the years is to connect those strands so we can see the tapestry, we can see the picture. And so I wanted to do that in this case between two covers. You know, all my books have different specializations and different areas of emphasis, but I wanted here to have the dots between two covers. So it's not, okay, when you've read this, you need to read that, then you read a bit of that, and then you'll kind of get the picture. I wanted to put it in one place, a one-stop shop. And funnily enough, it's the biggest book I've ever written. It's the biggest book I will ever write. And yet it's the easiest. It just flowed onto the page all the way through. And the research came in such an incredibly synchronistic way, day after day, that, you know, there was something behind it, that's for sure. I couldn't be more delighted with the way it turned out.
You know, David, you just mentioned many researchers focus on the threads and the dots. And what I respect and appreciate about your work is you certainly talk about the symptoms because you have to do that. But you then dive deep into the rabbit hole to identify the root cause. And it's that level of dot connecting that is so important to understand.
Well, I think what it is, Mike, if you're going to uncover the true depth and breadth of what we are experiencing and what we are facing, we need to drop the arrogance that says, I know what's going on, and therefore if somebody says something else that's different, then they must by definition be wrong. And what I do find in the conspiracy research arena, the alternative media, is that, you know, people talk about the mainstream media and the alternative media as if they were two things. But actually what it is, it's like a spectrum. So you go through the mainstream media and then you get to the edge of the mainstream media, which is a bit more open-minded than the great swathe of it. And at that point, the edge of the mainstream media meets the edge of the alternative media, because there are parts of the alternative media that are little different from the mainstream in the way they think and the way they look at the world. And I'm not criticizing here. I'm just making the point of how I'm seeing it. Those people will see that there is some manipulation going on, that it's not all random, but it's this little cabal. This cabal's doing it. And then you have the religious belief systems that dominate quite substantial swathes of the alternative media. And they are another block on where you will go and whether you will follow this information or that information. Because if they do, then their religious belief system is immediately under threat from information. You've also got the scientific believers, if you like, within the alternative media who believe in the mainstream of science in terms of the way it explains reality. And all those different areas have walls. They have walls of where people will go in terms of where the information's flowing. I'm not going to break my religious belief system or put it under challenge by going down this road. And I'm not going to break my scientific belief system in terms of what I think of reality by going down this road. And so with that mentality, you are going to go so far, and sometimes not very far, but that's all you're going to do. And what then happens is you reach the limit of how far you will go, and then there's nothing left because you're not moving forward anymore. You're not going deeper in the rabbit hole anymore. So you start to circle the wagons, and you start to go round and round and round and just repeat the same thing. The stories change. The government's doing this today. The government's doing that today. But actually, how far you've gone in trying to uncover what's actually happening is not moving on. It's just going round and round and round and round. And it's interesting to me that I've taken phenomenal levels of abuse from the mainstream media, especially in Britain. And yet that is matched by the levels of abuse that I get from the great swathes of the alternative media. Because in the end, both of them, that part of the alternative media anyway, are refusing to go into the realms of what you might call the unknown. They stay in the realms of the known. And if you stay in the realms of the known, then you're not going to move forward. And that's where the arrogance comes in, and really the self-delusion and this self-deception, which is that which is known is only that which there is to know. And for me, all along, I've got no religious belief system. I think mainstream science is akin to the Stone Age, and I have let information be my guide, and it's stood up or not stood up on the basis of the information. So what happens then, because there is so much to know compared with what we know, that the journey of understanding never stops. There's no wagons to circle because there's nowhere to stop. Every day you're looking to move on and understand more. And there's a great saying, wisdom tends to grow in proportion to one's awareness of one's own ignorance. You know, I'm not using the word ignorance in the sense of stupid. I'm using it in the sense of limited knowledge. And so once you realize that we know virtually nothing compared with what there is to know, then you're every day seeking to push that cutting edge back and understand more. And so it's every day is a great journey of discovery and understanding more. And what I found, because this is my passion anyway, you know, I do all the other parts of what I do because I believe it needs to be done. If we don't open our minds to the way that reality operates and its illusory nature in terms of physicality and solidity, then we never, ever, ever going to get close to understanding where all this is coming from. Because in so many ways, those that will not go there, which is the vast majority, they're what I might term movie correspondents. The mainstream media are reporting on the movie hitting the screen, what we call our daily reality. Much of the alternative media is reporting the movie as a movie critic, but coming from a slightly different angle in the way they see the movie. but it's still the movie that they are commenting on. And what we need to do, I would suggest anyway, if we're going to find out how we change the movie, is to find out where it's coming from. Where's the projector? And more than that, who's controlling what reel goes on? And so to do that, you've got to have a completely open mind. Have the humility to appreciate how little we know. And thus, well, great line from Socrates, wisdom is knowing how little we know. And then your mind is always open. It doesn't mean that you're going to accept anything just because, you see it. You look at it and you assess it and you see if it stands up. But what you don't do, which is what most people do, even in the mainstream, in the alternative media, and absolutely in the mainstream media, is they reject things by reflex action. It's what Albert Einstein called condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance. You need an open mind and you need to be belief system free. No belief systems to defend and justify. And then you've got a little chance of getting deeper in the rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's the toughest part, David. The indoctrination is so entrenched that getting people to take a step back and reassess, to set aside what they think they know, and then having the ability to go to the blackboard, erase it, and say, I'm going to start over. And so it's a challenge because people are so stuck in what they believe they know. And of course, most of what they believe or most of what they perceive is not grounded in truth. And that's a big part of the problem.
Yeah, when you look at human life, you come out of the womb and you are then influenced by parents who've been through the same system you're about to go through and have bought the program overwhelmingly. And they're not going to indoctrinate you with the program out of malevolence, but because they've been persuaded that what is a program is actually the way it should be. You then, earlier and earlier now in your life, I mean, you come out the womb and what you got? 3 years, 4 if you're lucky. And suddenly you are sitting in a room with an authority figure telling you what you can do, when you can leave, when you can't leave, what you're going to do today, what you're not going to do today, whether you can talk and whether you can't talk. I mean, it's extraordinary when you break it down and look at it dispassionately. You then go through this education system, which is just a sausage machine programming system. And if you buy the program really well and you repeat the program back in exams, you progress within the system. But if you won't accept the program, then you're a disruptive influence in the classroom. And you need to get some drugs for your attention deficit disorder and all this stuff. I had attention deficit disorder when I was at school. It was called being bored stiff. Then you go, if you pass your exams, you go to college and you go to university and you go through the whole thing at a higher level. You then go into your specialization and you're being told what's right and what's wrong. You're a doctor. Okay, you can only prescribe this and you can use these methods to treat your patient. Even though you may do some research and find that other methods work better, you can't prescribe them. Otherwise, we'll strike you off. Same in science. You want to go into areas that we don't want people to know about? Okay, well, your funding stopping then. And so you go through this, and all the time, the mainstream media is reinforcing that program through people called journalists who've been through the same program and politicians who've been through the same program. Or you've got peer pressure of friends and family who've been through the same program. And if you try to step out of the program, then they tell you that you're crazy or whatever. And the program is so deep that we have been persuaded, well, not all of us, but most people have been persuaded, that a complete madhouse called human society is actually sane, when it's just an inversion of everything. You know, we have people dying of hunger in a world of plenty. That's a fundamental inversion. There's something wrong here. There's people with loads of houses and vast amounts of land while people are sleeping in the street because they can't find a place for shelter. These are massive inversions. We go to war with each other and on multiple levels. These are all inversions. And it's based on ignorance, because the ignorance of reality and the program underpinning that ignorance of reality gives us the impression that we are our name, we are our life story, we are our race, we are our whatever. And yet that's just an experience. just a point of attention within infinite awareness, like everyone else is a point of attention within infinite awareness. And in the end, we are all that infinite awareness. But if you have a population in some kind of awareness of its true self, then that's a nightmare to manipulate, control, and direct. So what the system has to do, and those behind the system, deep, deep, deep in the rabbit hole, is to manipulate information to create ignorance, to repel all borders in terms of anyone challenging that ignorance with information, and to pull people into the 5 sense level of reality almost entirely, and out of the levels of influence of levels of consciousness that are outside of the program. And so what you're doing is you're isolating someone's point of attention in the 5 senses, in the frequency band we call visible light, etc., in which you are controlling the information. So the whole idea of the program is to isolate people's attention in the 5 senses and then feed those 5 senses with the information you want them to believe. And in this way, you can get infinite awareness, all that is, has been, and ever can be, to do a wonderful impression of an idiot. This is how it's done. I mean, there's a quote I've got in front of me here from William Casey, the CIA director, former CIA director. "We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false." And so we've got to start facing the fact that we're not just a little bit ignorant as a human race of who we are, where we are, and what the hell's going on. We're virtually completely ignorant of it. And, you know, when you think, it's funny to me. It's like whatever we know or think we know at any point becomes all there is to know. Now, I know people will say, well, no, I don't think that. Of course, there's more to know, but they act and respond to information that's outside their belief system in a way that actually says, oh, we know everything there is to know. Because if you don't know everything there is to know, how can you, by reflex action, reject something that you've not even researched? It's a staggering fact that it was only up to the 1920s, this all-knowing mainstream science was adamant that there was only one galaxy. Now, in evolutionary terms, if you like, in time terms, just a very short time after that point in the 1920s, now they're saying that the observable universe contains billions of galaxies. What? So, and yet, people will say, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, well, that's amazing. We thought it was one, and now we see it's all these. But at the same point, having accepted that, the next time someone else suggests information that challenges the mainstream, they'll act in the same way. No, that can't be true. What do you mean? Like you said, there was only one galaxy in the 1920s? What are you talking about? It's whatever what I'm saying is, it seems to me that whatever the status quo is, everyone runs to its defense until information forces the status quo to move, like the Earth is flat. Everyone knows the Earth is flat. Oh, you say the Earth is a sphere? You're mad. You're dangerous. Oh, now we know for sure it's a sphere. Okay, you say the Earth is flat? You're mad. It's the status quo that people run to the defense of all the time. And the status quo should not be something to be defended. It should be simply where we are at any point in time. Or at times another illusion, but at any point, this is where we are. But in the knowledge that wherever we are, there's always a vast, infinite amount still to know. So keep your mind open, and you might let something in worthwhile.
Hey, David, this is Al. For the people who are new to this whole field, especially with mind control, restricting people's access to true knowledge or distorting true knowledge, whether it's through religion, mainstream science, mainstream media, through the New Age movement, that's basically mind control 101, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I called the book The Perception Deception, because when there's a few of you and you want to control a large number, there's only one way you can do it, and that's to program and manipulate their perception, because from perception comes behavior. It comes what you will accept, what you will not accept. It comes in what you will do and won't do. Everything comes from perception. That's the bottom line. So the perception deception is actually the bottom line of the whole conspiracy.
Now, David, when we talk about the Matrix, it's brilliant in its construct. It's forcing a situation where people have to pay to live. It's clearly an anti-humanity agenda. If you have no money, you won't have a home, you won't have health care, you won't be able to eat. So why is it, in your opinion, because you've been doing this a very long time, that it takes so long for people to see it? And that's if they ever see it.
Well, maybe I could start the answer to that with a question. I'm sitting at the moment in front of a computer. When I type in data, information, and I press enter, does the computer sit down and have a think, work it out, assess it? No, it responds to it. Responds to it because that's what it's programmed to do. Biological computers can assess information. That's what the body is. That's what the immune system is. It's assessing information and making decisions. But in technological computer terms, it just responds to information. And it can only see what it's tuned to, if you like. I mean, this computer now is aware of the data that I put in, and it responds to it. But it's not aware of the room I'm sitting in. It's not aware of the room that it's sitting in. It's only aware of that which is passing through it, that which it is decoding. And it's my view, and I go into this in great detail in the Perception Deception, that the themes, not every detail, but the themes of the Matrix movie trilogy is pretty much where we're at. Because one of the great blocks on the sense of possibility, and the sense of possibility is manipulating that and suppressing that, is fundamentally important to the whole perception deception. Because if you can limit someone's sense of the possible, then you can operate and manipulate outside their sense of the possible. And when it's pointed out what they're doing, people will go, that's impossible. No, it's not impossible. You've just been programmed to believe it is because your sense of the possible has been suppressed and repressed. So when you let go of that suppressed sense of the possible and you go with the information, you realize a lot of things that just open the door to understanding. And one of them is, when you go into reality very early on, is that this world is not solid and it's not physical. There is no solid and there is no physical. It's an illusion of the decoding process. But if you think about it, although science has to acknowledge that this is the case because it's got a discipline area called quantum physics, the rest of the scientific disciplines actually just then ignore the fact that quantum physics exists when they're doing their own specializations, be it biology or whatever. I mean, there's that guy, Professor Richard Dawkins at Oxford University, is known in the United States quite well as well, who is dismissive of any alternative explanation of reality, any alternative view of health and healing. And ironically, and my goodness me, is an irony, condemns religion while being the high priest of his own, called scientism. Because what is religion? Religious belief. It's to have a belief system with walls around it and not go outside of that. That's what religions do. They say that everything we need to know is between the covers of this book or that book. And that's what the Richard Dawkins of this world do in terms of science and scientific information. And he said in one book that reality is not malleable, which is a nonsense. But he said in the same book, his knowledge of quantum physics is, quote, foggy. Now, this whole idea of, and this belief in the physical, existence of the physical, is such a prime foundation of all this. Because if you believe in the fact of physicality and solidity, then immediately you are perceiving the world and your potential in the sense of limitation. Because if the world was solid, then bingo, the list is endless of things that are not possible. And so if you smash a mirror in the middle, then the lines and the cracks will go off from that point in the center, and they will crack and distort the entire mirror. this belief, nonsense as it may be, that we live in a solid physical world is like smashing the mirror of human society, because from then it distorts everything. Politics is run on the basis that the world is solid. So is medicine, so is science, all of it. And a lot of the alternative media, for reasons I've talked about, goes down the same road. And that's why it can go no further. But once you realize that actually reality is not only malleable, that we are decoding information like a computer decodes the wireless internet and turns something that we can't actually see in the atmosphere around us into endless words, graphics, pictures, videos, all that on the screen of the computer. The only place that the internet, for instance, exists in the state that we experience it is on the screen. Everywhere else, it's electrical circuits and information fields. Same with television. The only place that television exists in the sense that we experience it is on the screen. Everywhere else, it's technology that's nothing like what we experience on the screen. And we are decoding information and turning it into a holographic reality on our screen. And that screen's in our brain, in our genetic structure. So suddenly, people changing shape, for instance, in front of your eyes, which most people would say that's impossible. You can't go from a solid body to another solid body and back again. Oh, you can't, absolutely. But neither body is solid. It's an information field, which first of all, you are decoding one, and then you are decoding another. And to the observer, the decoder, it appears that someone has changed shape solidly from one form to another. That's just one example of how once you realize the illusion of physicality, something becomes perfectly explainable and perfectly logical once you go beyond that. But that's where most people are. And they can't get their minds beyond the physical because their experience is that it's physical, because that's what they're decoding. Now, if we, as is the case, are decoding a certain frequency band into visual reality, in this case, this unbelievably, almost laughably narrow band of frequency we call visible light, which is just a smear in even what mainstream science says exists in our reality, then we are decoding that frequency band. Like a radio is tuned to radio 1 or radio 2, or television is tuned to a certain channel. Now, if you start broadcasting information on that frequency band, or, and I think this is the case, the human form has been manipulated. This is the whole theme you find throughout the ancient world, not just in the Bible, of the sons of God who interbred with the daughters of men, this genetic manipulation of the human race. If you can change the nature of the biological computer, if you like, so that it's picking up the frequencies or a band that you are broadcasting, then just as a television, if you tune it to NBC, is going to pick up NBC, it's going to put NBC on the screen. Well, the principle is the same. If an information reality, I would say it is, in a much more advanced way, what we would call a computer simulation, if you broadcast that on the frequency band that our bodies are tuned to, then we are going to put that on our screen. It is going to be our holographic brackets physical experience, just as NBC is going to be the experience of that television while it's tuned to that channel. And I would suggest that that is what happened. And the more that people are manipulated into the 5 sense level of perception, the more completely they are locked into that frequency band. So that, I mean, you tried telling that television that NBC is an illusion. I mean, if the television could speak, it'd say, you're mad. Look at it. I'm experiencing it. It's NBC, look. But it doesn't have to be. And when you open your mind to a greater level of awareness, You expand your point of attention from merely the five senses to the five senses out into an expanded level of consciousness beyond this frequency band. Then you start to sense things and see things that five sense reality alone will never see, because it's in the program and of the program. And this is why those that research and perceive only the five sense level of the conspiracy, what I described earlier as the movie screen, they'll never see the depth of what's happening, and therefore where it's coming from, and the big therefore, what we can do to change what goes on the screen. People can't see it for the same reason that television can't see beyond NBC.
Well, David, a big part of the game also, and you obviously notice, is to keep people separated from higher consciousness. And as I touched upon before, if you restrict their knowledge and twist their knowledge, it hinders people from having reasonable thought. And, along with restricting knowledge, if you keep the left and right brain out of balance, it impairs proper moral action. They lose their principles, which in turn creates a very chaotic society, which the cabal at the top love because that just gives them more of an excuse to implement more control over society, and it's an endless cycle.
Yes, one of the great elements of the perception deception is diversion, perception diversion, focusing people on things that don't matter, focusing people on personal conflicts and group conflicts, and making sure that the five senses are constantly stimulated so that they dominate the experience of everybody. I see people, they get into a car, they have to turn the radio on. They go into a room, they have to put the television on. They have to be constantly talking or in conversations with people. What they're doing is they're filling the silence. People are often uncomfortable with the silence, and it's in the silence when you let your mind go where it wants to go. You set it free to explore itself, that you start to get the insights and the inspirations and the connections that take you out of mind into what I call consciousness beyond mind. And so, yeah, keeping people occupied. Is that document that came to light called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, which was basically a manual on how to mass mind control the population. And there was a line in there, keep them busy, busy, busy back on the farm with the other animals. Keep them busy, busy, busy. Keep them focused. Keep them focusing on ambition. Keep them focusing on survival. It doesn't matter what they're focusing on as long as they're focusing on something. And give them the goals, give them the dreams, They give us our dreams so that we stay a bloody sleep. And just keep them away from focusing attention or not even focusing attention, letting their mind wander into other states of possibility. And this is why where mainstream science plays a fundamental part in this, by denying the existence of other levels of awareness and expanded consciousness and infinite awareness. Its job is to be the guards on the gate to people's perception of themselves in a eternal, infinite level of self-identity. This is all an accident. Oh yeah, this is all a bloody accident. Yeah, of course it is. It's moronic. It's moronic. But the program is such that madness is sanity, because it's an inversion. Everything's an inversion. This is an important area in terms of where do we go from here, because if people believe that the way to challenge this gathering imposition is by stockpiling weapons and going to war on the Illuminati or whatever, what they're actually doing is just becoming a polarity, an essential polarity to that which they say they want to challenge and remove, doubling the problem. Let's fight the Illuminati. Oh no, we've got another fight now. Well, that's moved us all on. The thing is, we got into this situation because we allowed ourselves to be lulled and manipulated into a state of unconsciousness. That's basically what humanity is in a state of unconsciousness. Now, we are not going to change that by responding to what is happening from that same state of unconsciousness. We're not, because these networks and that in the unseen that is behind these networks they're not all powerful, all knowing. They're idiots, basically, because they wouldn't want to be doing what they're doing unless they were fundamentally distorted and imbalanced. What they have done is to make human society and human perception more ignorant and more imbalanced than they are. The phrase that comes to mind is, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the one-eyed man manipulating and lording it over the blind, the unconscious, in other words. And so if we start to get an inkling that we don't like what's going on, if we try to respond to that from that same state of unconsciousness, then the one-eyed man is still going to be king. We need to reverse the cause of the problem, to reverse the inversion. And that is to start to remember and respond to the true nature of who we are. And from that expanded awareness of self and reality will come the inspiration and the insight that will lead to this whole thing coming down. Our state of being, our state of emotion, our state of mind, our state of perception is an expression. They're all expressions of states of frequency, states of energetic vibration. And therefore, when we're pulled into unconsciousness, we're pulled into low vibrational states of density. Then again, even in that sense, gives us a greater sense of the physical, of the solid. And from those states of density, we've put ourselves in an energetic prison. And we are playing, in vibrational frequency terms, in the stadium of the manipulators and the manipulating force, because their low vibrational state, which manifests as the desire to have control over and to exploit people on this scale, means that they're in a low vibrational state. So we're playing away from home. Not only that, we're playing in a stadium that they're experts at, because it's their stadium, it's their realm of existence. And once you start to open your mind to consciousness, you start to reevaluate the little me perception of self to the I am infinite awareness, all possibility. The vibrational state starts to quicken. We start to dance to a different drum. And that vibrational state, as more and more open to it, starts to impact itself upon the collective energy field. And we start to break up that density. We start to leave the stadium of the manipulators and we start to play at home in our stadium of higher awareness, higher consciousness, and therefore a higher vibrational state. And everything starts to move, everything starts to shift. So you see, if you have a situation where those that see one level of, and it's only one level of the conspiracy, and because they are seeing the 5 sense level alone and responding from a 5 sense unconscious point of view, and let's fight the Illuminati, let's stockpile weapons, what they're doing is creating an extension of the low vibrational state, which actually takes them deeper into the stadium of the manipulation. So this is why it's so important that people, not least in the alternative media, get themselves a blank sheet of paper, symbolically or literally, and say, okay, I'm starting again here. And what I perceive is going to be based on information, not on preconceived idea, i.e. belief system. I'm not going to edit information on the basis of protecting my previous belief. I'm just going to let information be my guide. And then what that's doing, it's saying to the mind, if you like, it's fine to open up and go wherever it takes you. And that's when everything starts to move, everything starts to shift. And suddenly things that made no sense before suddenly make sense. And I'm having this experience now in the sense of people are contacting me and I'm meeting them in the street more and more. Used to abuse me in the street at one point. Now they're stopping me to talk about my books and stuff. And so there is an awakening going on, no question. It's not what we'd like yet. It's not the magnitude of what we would like, but it's happening. I have no question about that. And people are now talking to me in terms of opening their minds to concepts they would have laughed at not so long ago by reflex action. and that there is a movement, and the alternative media needs to reflect that, because if it stays in the five senses alone of all this, well, it's going to document the building of its own prison, but it ain't going to stop the prison being built.
Well, you know, David, you've been completely vindicated. Everything you've been writing about for almost 25 years is rolling up on people's doorsteps now. And it's very difficult for folks who are scoffing at it to deny it. I mean, it's just right there now. It's in their face. But I did want to ask you a question. In Perception Deception, you spend time discussing the forces behind this control, the archons.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could talk a bit about that so our audience can get a better understanding of who and what the archons are.
Well, first of all, the archons is just a name that I chose to use. They're known by many, many different names all over the ancient world. And the thing that allows the pennies to drop is when people realize that all these different names that the ancients in different cultures had for, quote, the gods, are actually different names for the same force. I mean, you look at the archons. The archons is a name given to this manipulating force within the unseen by a group, if you like, a belief system, not quite that, but you know what I mean, called the Gnostics, the pre-Christian Gnostics. These were people who, whenever they put their heads above the parapet, if you like, were targeted mercilessly by the Roman Church. They manifested as the people that ran the Great Library of Alexandria, which was this depository of fantastic numbers of scrolls and documents detailing what the ancient world knew, but that the manipulators wanted to take out of public circulation because it was giving a view of the world and reality that they didn't want people to know. A lot of those documents were destroyed when the library was destroyed and burnt, but a lot of them, I have no doubt, are still in the vaults of the Vatican. And the Cathars in southern France were also of the Gnostic persuasion, who were, again, destroyed over a period of time, culminating with the siege of Montségur, the castle in southern France in, I think it was 1244. And what happened, and thank goodness it did, is that in 1945, a sealed jar was found in a place called Nag Hammadi in Egypt, about 70 odd miles from Luxor on the Nile. And what was found inside were documents that were buried by the Gnostics, probably the Gnostics connected to the Great Library of Alexandria. And of course, because they'd been out of public circulation all that time, unlike the biblical text, they'd not had the opportunity to be manipulated and changed to fit the authorities' desires of the day. And 1/5 of these documents are about the archons. They talk about a Lord Archon, which they call the demiurge, and they equate the demiurge not just with what people call the devil, Satan, whatever, but with the Judeo-Christian Yahweh, Jehovah, God. And they said that in their prime form, this archontic force is just energy. It's energetic. It's an awareness, but it does take form. And funnily enough, in these writings, it says the form they take most, given what I've written over the years, is reptilian, and also described in a way that is the classic grey aliens that people talk about. And when you then look around the world, you find the same phenomenon, just called different names, to the not just the Islamic belief system, but the pre-Islamic world in that part of the world. The archons, that the Gnostics called them, were called the jinn. And it's fascinating when you see how the jinn and the archons are described. One, they say, was made from luminous fire. And then the other, they said, was made from smokeless fire. They're talking about the same phenomenon. And they also, you also have the demons of Christianity. The demons of Christianity are the archons and the jinn. And so it goes on around the world. And what the Gnostics said about this archonic force is that it has no creative imagination and it envies humans. No creative imagination. Put simply, if you gave this force a blank sheet of paper, it couldn't create anything. But you give it a piece of paper with something on and it can manipulate and twist it, but it can't create it. They're described in our terms as like cyborgs, like a robotic race that can imitate but not innovate, something they call counter mimicry in our language. They talk about the fact that these entities, these archonic entities, are mind parasites. They lock into the human mind and manipulate it and what we would call possess. They are masters of deception, and they are capable of what they call fantasia, which is, in our terms, virtual reality manipulation, what we call the matrix. And they are masters of inversion. The way that this archonic force is described mirrors the way that our reality is being manipulated and the methodology used. See, if you can't create a prison society for humans because you have no creative imagination, the Gnostics said that the archons were inorganic, mechanical. If you can't create the prison you want to put humans in, then you get humans to create their own. Humans who do have creative imagination. What the Gnostics said about the archons is that they can make something appear to happen that does not actually happen. In our terms, induce a virtual reality experience. And the pre-Islamics and the Islamic religion today says of the jinn, they can manipulate humans by creating illusions. In Central America, some shaman there talk about the flyers. The way they describe the flyers is in the same terms as the archons and the jinn are described. And so we have in our reality, because these entities are not in the frequency band of our reality. They can come in, they can take form and come in, not more than briefly, I don't think, as what we call reptilians or greys. But they can't stay and manipulate ongoing. And I don't compare with the human population, there don't seem to be many of them anyway. So they've created a network of middlemen and women that are operating within the frequency band of humans, but they are not human in the same sense. They are hybrids. They are an energetic hybrid, which is very powerfully connected in frequency terms to this archonic force in the unseen. And these are what we call the Illuminati bloodlines. These are the royal bloodlines that were and still claim the right to rule because of their descendants from the gods. The gods were the archons, are the archons. And the irony is, as I point out in detail in the Perception Deception, is that Satanists, the secret societies like the Freemasons, and the mainstream religions, the gods of the mainstream religions, they're all the same force. They're all worshipping the archons. They're all worshipping this archonic force without realizing it. The irony is that the God of the Bible, the God of the Old Testament, for instance, they or it is the archons, and the so-called Lord Archon or Demiurge, the Mr. Big, and the Satan figure, the devil figure, is just another name for the same thing. So you see, it's my view, and I'm going to go into this and put this all together at the Wembley Arena in London on the 25th of October over about 10 hours, that the matrix, the walls of the matrix are what we call the speed of light. And that light, as we perceive it, you see, what is light? People perceive light as something that allows them to see. I perceive light as information, which can be decoded as something you can see, i.e. daytime, and it can be decoded as something you can't see, i.e. nighttime, and can also exist as something on a different frequency, which is what mainstream science calls things like dark matter. But the light that we're decoding, that aspect of what we call light that we're decoding, is the matrix. It is the information field spectrum that we're turning into this fake reality. So when at the start of the biblical text, God says, let there be light, and starts to go through the creation of this world, I say that is describing the creation of the Matrix, the fake world.
So, David, staying on the topic of the Gnostics and the Archons, according to the story of Sophia, the Archons were an unexpected development during the creation of the solar system, and they're said to be inorganic along with the rest of the planets, with the exception of the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun.
Right.
What's your take on that?
I'll tell you what I think the demiurge is. I think it's a distortion. People, we tend to see things in human terms, as entities. It has to be some kind of form, some kind of entity to have awareness. No, everything's got awareness. And a distortion can have self-awareness. And so I'm going to explain this at Wembley, but I have also in detail in the Perception Deception. I say the demiurge that the Gnostics are describing is actually a distortion, a distorted awareness. And if you are a distorted awareness, you are operating in a certain energetic, vibrational state. And if you are going to control and manipulate a target in another state, say of balance and harmony, which is what existed here before the hijack, then you have to pull your target into your distortion, because distortions can't, in that vibrational frequency state, can't manipulate another frequency state. It's just like one radio station can't distort another radio station. There has to be a connection. And what I would say that we've seen through what we call human history, that's another story as well, is humans being constantly pulled and drawn into the distortion. So they become the distortion. And that's why we live in an inverted society. That's why we have such extraordinary levels of imbalances and disharmony across the great swathe of human society. It's because they have turned human society into a holographic expression of the distortion that it is and that they are. And so you could almost think of it, and I think absolutely you could think of it in these terms, of what we would call a computer virus, which piggybacks the mainframe, if you like, the main program, and doesn't create anything, but distorts what is already there. Think of a self-aware computer virus and what that could do. Funnily enough, last week I saw a movie called Transcendence with Johnny Depp, in which he was a transhumanist, and the old transhumanism thing is pull us further and further into the distortion and away from consciousness. He played a transhumanist expert who was working to bring in AI, artificial intelligence, and he died over about a few weeks. And in those few weeks when they knew he was dying, they downloaded his mind onto technology, and then connected it to the internet and let that mind become the internet. And so the internet became self-aware, self-aware through this distortion, this symbolic distortion. And because everything was connected to the internet, this was able to basically start dictating to the world in the way that was symbolized in the Matrix movies, with the machines controlling humans through technology and illusion. So that's what I feel it is. More and more blatantly, to me, that's what we're dealing with. It's not just a distortion. It's not just a schism. It's self-aware, can make decisions and manipulate consciously to pull its target into its state of distortion. And once it's done that, then that which falls for the distortion and gets pulled into distortion becomes what? Becomes another expression of the distortion. And the distortion grows in power, and those that are pulled into it become nothing more than expressions of the distortion. And that's what happens when people lose their minds to it and get pulled into it, so it becomes their means of and source of perception. You look at that and then ask the question, why can't these people see it? Well, they can't see it because they can't decode it, because the world that you're talking about is not one that they can perceive because they're not seeing the world in the way that others are seeing it.
David, a question I have for you, and I've always wondered this when I've read your work, is do you ever have those moments in time when you think to yourself, can we really make this shift? I mean, because I take a look at, as an example, the Matrix today. It's stepping up its control mechanisms as the awakening is escalating, right? So it's almost like, okay, I see they're waking up, so more oppression, more control is in order.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Can we make this shift? Can we make this change?
Yes, we can. And, it's like if you have a dam holding water back, it can take a long, long time for the cracks to appear in the dam. But once the cracks start to appear, the dam can then fall very quickly after that. And what I'm seeing now, cracks beginning to appear, not least through the number of people within the system who are not knowingly manipulating, but are part of the system, who are starting to see it and are starting to go through this process of what's it all about? What am I doing? Why are we doing this? It's like the Sleeping Beauty is waking up and going, hold on a second. Why are we doing this? Why am I doing that? To what end? What's it all about? They're the things that I'm seeing happen with a lot of people within the system who wouldn't before have even contemplated questioning the system. The system was everything. So it is starting to happen, and it's like everything. Once it starts to motor, it's like a snowball rolling down a mountain. It picks up speed and it picks up volume, and these manipulators, for all their arrogance and all their sense of all powerfulness, they are terrified of humans waking up. One of the themes of this archonic force is that they envy humans because humans have potential that they do not possess because they're in a distorted state. Therefore, they have tremendous limitations in what they can do, not least creative imagination. And that they are terrified of humans waking up because once we become two-eyed and third-eyed, the one-eyed has no power anymore. And the distortion does not have a power source, natural power source, because of its state of being. Therefore, it has to draw its power, its energy from humans and human society and probably many other places too. And this is why, I've been talking and writing for all these years about how the reptilian entities, which are an expression in these terms of this archonic force, feed off human low vibrational energy. They feed off fear and anxiety and frustration and worry and depression. And so this archonic manipulation has manipulated human society into a structure that generates maximum amounts of this energy. So when in the Matrix, Morpheus holds up a battery and says the machines have turned humans into one of these, that was very, very symbolic of actually what is happening. And that is another reason why the answer is to open your mind, let consciousness in, and open your heart and let harmony in, because that will deny the manipulating force its energy source, which is low vibrational human emotion. People say, wars are wars of acquisition and wars of this and wars of that, and it's all true. But there's another aspect to war. There's another aspect to suffering. And that is the energy generated from that event or that situation. It's no accident that Satanists, for instance, that are knowingly worshipping these demonic, archonic, quote, gods, focus their rituals on death and decay. It's because that's the energy of the archons. And so when you are seeing a planet being destroyed by the manipulations of these archonic bloodlines, and people say, well, why are they destroying their own planet? Well, what if the planet that works for humans does not work for them? Because humans are in their true state about life, and the archonic force is about death. Again, it's very symbolic, and probably more than that the word evil is the reverse of the word live. again, an inversion of life. Once you start to realize how it fits together across this great swathe of different subjects, which all connect, what's happening in the world today, in the five sense world, across the great spectrum of society, all fits once you realize what the game is and what's behind the game. This millions of times increase in radiation, technologically generated radiation in our atmosphere that we're living in, is not by accident, but by design. They're changing the atmosphere to suit them as opposed to us. All these dots connect, all these strands tie up once you realize where it's coming from, why, to what end, and the methods used to get there.
David, you had mentioned earlier in the show that you will be speaking much more about the archons and the material in Perception Deception later this year in October at Wembley. And by the way, I attended your show back in 2012 in Cleveland, and it was just a terrific show. And I was wondering if you had any plans to do another event here in the United States.
Not at the moment, no. What I decided to do, because if you saw me at Cleveland, you didn't see me. You saw a guy hanging on for dear life physically, because that was at the end of a really grueling tour around the world, which took me to 6 events in Australia, and where my rest weeks were taken by added events because of the interest to New Zealand and all over. And when I came back from that, I decided I was going to make the information travel, and I was going to give myself a rest because I'm here for the long haul. So I decided that I was going to do the Wembley Arena in 2012, and that went really well. And what I've done in the 2 years since is written the Perception Deception and worked to create an internet television channel to put this information out 24 hours a day, which has been incredibly challenging and grueling. I'm going to do Wembley again on the 25th of October. What I'll do in 2015, I don't know yet, but I do feel I've not spoken in America for the last time, put it that way. So we'll see where that goes. But, I've been going to the United States now regularly until the last couple of years, since about 1993-4. And I've spent 3 months at a time there many times. I've watched it change. If people came into this country from outside, they'd see how this country had changed too. In fact, you can see it anyway. But so me coming in and out over that period, I've seen it change. It's become such a more controlled society in terms of your actual experience, not researching it, but actually your experience. Airport security and security for this and security for that. Of course, it's not security to protect people. It's security to control people coming through immigration and all that stuff. It's a real bore. I mean, I've not been into Canada since, they won't let me speak in Canada. I haven't been into Canada since about 1999 without being stopped by immigration, no matter what the reason I go in for, because I'm on their list. And it's easier to just stay here and make the information travel. But I don't think that's going to be the case after 2014. I think I am going to start traveling again.
Well, the technology today allows you to do that.
Yeah, it's great. It's brilliant.
Well, David, you have been very generous with your time, and I know you have to run. And I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, and I highly recommend everyone visit David's website, davidicke.com, and pick up a copy of Perception Deception. And David, I would love to have you come back and join us again sometime in the future.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. I always like talking to awake people. It's always a pleasure.
The pleasure was all ours, David, and again, thank you so much and have a great evening.
Okay, thank you.
And that concludes our discussion with David Icke. I hope you found the conversation as fascinating as we did. David's website is davidicke.com, where you can pick up a copy of his new book, The Perception Deception. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and for visiting our blog, sageofquay.com. Also, please visit my other website, laboroflovemusic.com, to take a listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, to live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.